Back in England, a lady did dwell. Way back in England, a lady did dwell. Her name was Pretty Polly, boys, I loved her so well. Oh, Polly, pretty Polly, come take me in kind. Polly, pretty Polly, come take me in kind. Let me sit down beside you and tell you my mind. Oh, my mind is to marry and never to part. My mind is to marry and never to part. For the first time I saw you, it wounded my heart.
New lights. I put all new LED lights in throughout the shop, added as many more as I could. The lighting in here is really difficult to do because I've got the ceiling joist or the floor joist from above that all the lights fit into. Previously you'd see all the fluorescent bulbs hanging down. They're always messing up my shots. I hated it. So I got these 1x4 LED light panels, set them right up into the back, and hopefully things will be better. I know I should probably like paint the ceiling white or something like that would be the best way to sort of get more light into here. But I don't really want a white ceiling. I like the sort of ambiance of the wooden ceiling. Plus it's a whole lot of work and there's tons of junk in the ceiling, and I should have done that when I moved in here, but I didn't. So this is the fall vlog. So summer's gone. I've been taking some time off from video making and boat building over the course of the summer. I had some projects to finish up, mostly related to just doing some stuff around the house, finishing off my cottage, which has been under renovation for about the last 5 years. Just got that done. Of course, there's always more projects, but the main cottage is done. And that little video you saw about doing a ship's ladder, that was for the cabin. Basically, we've got a loft, it needed a ladder to get up there. And now I'm getting back into the flow of the workshop. I've got a couple little projects that are furniture related that I'm going to focus on before I get back to the boat building. So one of them is prototyping for a lighting designer in New York. And I cannot show you what the finished product will look like, but I can sort of touch on some of the elements of the project in terms of how I got to build this thing. So once it's all done and he's received the finished prototype and he photographs it and he's going to put it on his website and all that, I will reveal all. But until then, I cannot show you all. However, it does involve a whole bunch of hoops, and it involves a whole bunch of arcs like this. This mold is a great example of the type of mold that was often used in the canoe making industry when you needed to do multiples of something, specifically stems, for instance. You might make a whole bunch of stems and set them all up on a mold like this, which is basically like a couple of bulkheads and then a whole bunch of little battens to span the shape of that and create a larger mold. I did actually do the bending on this, but I had anticipated on using a more traditional bending mold with a backing strap. I just found when I got right down to it that the bends went easily. I didn't really need to use this. However, whenever I'm bending stuff, I typically will use something like this. So we've got our finished shape. Well, not quite. Usually I will incorporate at least a 20% overbend to allow for spring back. We've got a little stop here, and the finished stock will fit into this little slot, and then the backing strap lies on top of that. That would go like so, and then the strap here backs up the whole bend to prevent breakout on the back side. There's also a smaller version of it here, a much tighter bend, which of course required a smaller mold, but the same idea. Anyhow, these are just sitting there drying, and hopefully once they're dry they will hold their finished shape, although I do expect a little bit of spring back still. So these molds have been built with that in mind too, so they're still oversprung by about 10 or 20% as well. Now the big challenge for this project is these hoops. So I've made these ring molds, and I've got two different things that I need to produce. One of them are these very thin 1/4 inch round hoops, and I need to figure out how to scarf them. So because it's such a small cross section of material, I didn't want to try and predetermine the lengths, because I always struggle with that. I know you can do a little bit of math and you should be able to come close, but I always find that I don't quite get it right, and the finished product doesn't always sit on the mold exactly so, and yada yada yada. Normally when we scarf something like this, we want the scarf to lie 90 degrees to the bend, such that the top piece sandwiches the bottom piece, right? So that's in compression, presses down, and we glue up this joint like so, and this guy gets captured by the bend. In this case, because I couldn't really pre-scarf, even pre-scarfing 1/2 didn't make a lot of sense, I decided to come up with a different solution, and I decided to scarf in line with the bend. So my scarves are running perpendicular instead of horizontal, and I'll show you a little jig that I made in order to cut those quickly and reasonably accurately. So here's my scarf jig. It's dead simple. It's really just a piece of ply with a couple of rails on here that have my scarf ratio planed into the top of them, and so I'm using what is basically like a 1:12 scarf. And because I'm dealing with material that's curved, one of the reasons I wanted to change up the angle of the scarf, the attitude, is because trying to cut a scarf onto this curved surface would be very, very difficult, of course, because I don't have any clean references. It's all curved, and the diameters are different and everything too, so trying to go from one hoop to the next hoop, different diameters, there's no jig that I could make that would be universal for that. What's making this work so nicely is if you think about this as being a hoop that we need to cut scarves into, the shape of the hoop actually aids in aligning the scarf in the right orientation, because the curve here forces it to lie in one specific orientation. So all I'm doing is laying the stock right here on the jig, and I'm throwing another little piece of material in here just to help the clamping block stay put. I've got a clamping block that's got a bit of cork on one side, a bit of sandpaper on the other, and it doesn't really need to have either of those, but it was a sanding block I had on hand. So it's cut to fit right there so that we can get a really nice, strong, positive clamping on there. And then just using a block plane, just letting the toe and heel ride on these rails here. And even though this wants to spring up a little bit, it's fine, because it just lays back down as I plane over it. And I'll just basically plane this thing down until it stops taking any wood. There we go, we're done. So that's giving me a nice flat scarf on there. you simply flip this over. There's my scarf length too, so I can mark it on the stock if I want to. The most awkward thing is the fact that I don't have a lot of room here between the clamp and the end of the scarf for the plane. There we go, that's done now too. So now I can just put these together, and if I do them on a mold, if I drop this on the mold, you'll see that the ends spring up. But what I found is I can just use some masking tape to pull that scarf down into alignment, and it'll end up aligning just fine, and use a couple of small clamps spanning that joint in order to keep it nice and tight. You can see right here, this one's glued up right here. And what I like about it best is it maintains the attitude of the form better, I think, than if I tried to do a flat scarf on the face of it in this particular context. Now I'm going to do this next bend onto here. The piece of material I have on here right now is like an in whale on a canoe, and we need to bend the out whale onto it. My out whale is molded in profile, meaning it's got some round overs on the corners, and I can't get the finished length for it right now because there's going to be some material between the in whale and that out whale or rub rail, and so I don't know exactly what that's going to be. So what I'm doing is I'm sort of pre-bending this, and I'm only cutting one end of the scarf, and I'm using a nibbed scarf or a hooked scarf. And I'm doing that so that the finished product has got a little bit of meat on its feather edge, instead of it being an actual feather edge that I would have to clamp down carefully, glue carefully, and then have to finish cleaning up afterwards. I'm making it nibbed so it's got a bit more meat to it, so I can clamp it down, and hopefully it will hold its shape better, and I can use a mechanical fastener to hold the end of that scarf if I want to. Now I'm finding having my mold on this wheel here like this to be super helpful. It just, I can't quite explain why it's nice to work like this, but it just is. It just allows me to sort of focus on where I'm putting my back pressure onto the bend with my hand very easily. It's easier for me to grab clamps and things like that, and more importantly, I'm not knocking over a bunch of stuff that's all around the bench, which if I'm bending horizontally is so often the case. This mold is 42 inches in diameter, which requires some stock that's almost 11 feet long in order to wrap around it. If I were to do this horizontally, that piece of stock is going to be hitting all kinds of stuff on my workbenches as I try and wrap it around this mold. But when I do it vertically, the stock is mostly just lying on the ground, and as I wrap it around, it behaves itself really well. Plus, it's much easier for me to use my hands to control the bend and to back it up as I go. Okay. Damn, that is hot. Okay, here we go. So the first clamp is just going to hold this down. And now I'm just clamping as I go, partially just to keep this thing from jumping off the mold. Okay, this right here is an important detail. You notice I added a little shim in here. And the idea is that I want this portion of the bend to sort of adopt a very fair curve that matches the rest. If I were to squeeze it down in here, it would create a flat spot in here, and because I still need to cut the scarf. So the finished product, I need another little shim there to get this feather edge down. once I cut the scarf, this is just going to drop into place, and this shape in through here is going to be nice and consistent with the rest. Also, you might notice I'm tight down here, but as I get into this last quarter of the bend, I'm just letting this thing pop up a little bit higher and through here so that it's not being forced down tight. It's to make sure that this is a nice easy bend that once it's finished and cut to final length, it's going to fit nicely onto this shape without sort of any irregular shapes appearing there. Now for this particular part, it's a little wider, and I need to be able to glue this together on the finished product with very little glue squeeze out or no glue squeeze out, and clamping could be an issue. And so that's why I decided to go with this hooked scarf. It's going to allow me to sort of establish the finished shape relatively easily, or the finished length relatively easily. There's a positive sort of stop on it, and more importantly, because this part has basically got a cross section like this, it's rounded over on the top edges. By doing a hooked scarf, we can take that hook down till it clears that molded portion. And so in the finished product, it just looks like a nice clean straight line. It isn't like this fuzzy edged rounded over thing that you would get if you did a proper regular feather edged flat scarf. That's something I actually do in canoes as well. When I need to scarf gunnels in the middle, I will sometimes actually do a nibbed scarf like that, because I think it looks a whole lot better than doing a flat scarf where you see that glued feather edge kind of messing up with, it never takes the finish the same and things like that. So just a fussy little thing that I like to do, and it's really not too hard to do those. It takes a few more moments to actually try and cut that little haunch, and you pretty much have to kind of taper it out by hand using chisels and or rabbit planes and things like that, but it doesn't take a huge amount of time. And when you fit the other half of the scarf, it's actually not that difficult to do because it's nib end, it's got some thickness to it. I find it actually a little bit easier to deal with than coming down to an exact feather edge. So for the hoops, they're just a 1/4 inch in diameter. They're scarfed down this way, and I've glued them together with Gorilla Glue, which is a polyurethane glue. It's a foaming glue. I hate using this stuff normally, but I used it in this case because this wood is green, or well, it's been soaked in a tank in order for it to be used like it was green, and I want to be able to glue it up very quickly after doing my bending. And so the polyurethane glue is about the only one that is that will hang on to dampish wood. In fact, it wants you to dampen the wood down. It's a moisture curing glue. It wants you to dampen down those fang surfaces of your joint before you even put the glue on there. So that's the one glue that works in my favor when working with wood that is not bone dry. If I wanted to do this with epoxy, I would have to use G-Flex epoxy, and even still, it's a little bit fussier, and mixing up small quantities is fussy compared to just something that's straight out of the bottle. I wanted to just do a couple of shout outs. I got some new followers on Patreon here. Let me just give you a verbal shout out. And that's Kevin Vandiver, Brandon Veach, and Derek Kennedy. And Derek, he's going to be building a drift boat with my mentorship. Now, I don't know if we'll see any of that. He doesn't live locally, so we certainly won't see any video of that from me. Maybe Derek will show us a few videos or a few photographs of his project along the way. So that would be fun. So another thing I wanted to talk about for a moment here is Star Bond adhesives. So Star Bond makes a line of cyanoacrylate glues. That's crazy glue to you punters out there. And I've been using them for about a year now, I guess. And I have to say that I am really quite pleased with them. So they've sent me some more stuff here. Some of them are super thin, water thin. They're thick. I find between those two, my bases are covered, but they make a medium as well. They also make a black tinted one. And then they've got their accelerator here, which works really nicely too. And I've mentioned it before, but what I find great about this is this, when you're using accelerators, sometimes with some cyanoacrylates, when you hit them with the accelerator, if you're a little bit too aggressive, they will foam up white on you very badly. And where there's a matter of finish concerned, it's not so good. But this accelerator combined with these glues are a little more gentle. And so I find they don't foam up if you're not like crazy, like don't hose it down like a fire hose. You know, you just need a little spritz. But I find they work really well together at not foaming up. And so if you're using cyanoacrylate to say fix a dent in a varnished finish, which it works really well for, that foaming up is the thing you want to avoid. I almost forgot, when I did my scow videos, I put out a challenge for people out there to build a little scale model of something that they're interested in building. And I was gonna, the first couple people that sent me pictures of that, we're gonna get some Starbond products as a freebie. Only one guy took me up on that, and that's Deb Bonnet. Thank you, Deb, for actually following through on that little challenge, and you have received a bunch of Starbond products. Hope you have some fun with that. If anybody else wants to take a crack at that, by all means, make a model, post it on Instagram, tag me, tag Starbond, and first couple people to do that, I'm gonna get some free Starbond product. It is good stuff, you know, give it a shot. All right, and I'm trying to encourage you to get up there, just do some stuff, man. Get in the workshop, get your hands dirty, get started on something that you have been wanting to build that you have yet to actually launch on. And model making is the best way to get launched on an idea that you have been stewing on for a while. So by all means, get your hands dirty, get some free stuff. Who doesn't want some free stuff? It's good stuff too. It's not like crappy free stuff. Okay. I also want to say thank you to Rich Braband. When he was watching my scow video, I was making this, those of you who haven't watched it, I did a little video on sort of redesigning this swimming scow. It was a fun little video to make, and I'll probably still do a third episode in which we talk about construction alternatives about that. I just haven't had the time. But I did mention that what I don't have in my arsenal of tools here is a tiny little table saw for doing some tiny table saw stuff. Rich Braband, who's been one of my Patreon followers, Patreon supporters, sent me this little table saw, which is hilarious. It's kind of like just the size I really need to for the kind of stuff I want to do. It doesn't have the thinnest blade. I should see if I can find a way to get a really hyper thin blade onto here. Maybe if I start looking around at slitting saws from the milling industry, I can get something like that. It's got a little rip fence. I can slide onto here. And the weird thing is, this thing apparently came with this power supply, just like twice the size of the saw. But anyhow, thank you very much, Rich. That will definitely get put to use. And we'll have some fun playing around with that, and be a whole lot safer for me to do ripping up some really small stuff on this compared to trying to do it on a full-size table saw, which is not always the best idea, of course. So in terms of what to expect from the Nomad boat building channel here coming up, I am going to be starting to release the Catalina Wary series. Now, I've sort of the boat's done, it's built, it's gone off to the finished client. I do not have launching video of it, I'm afraid. Hopefully by the time the series is done, we'll get some of that, but for a number of reasons that wasn't possible at the time that we built it. Anyhow, I've been kind of dragging my heels on getting these videos out. Those of you on Patreon have probably seen I put out about 8 or 10 rough cut videos of that build, got it to a certain stage, and then I got just too busy with different things, and I dropped the ball on putting those videos out. And I just have not had time to get back into the editing of it. So if you are on Patreon or you join Patreon, there are a bunch of preliminary videos of that build available to you already, but the ones that come out here on YouTube are going to be quite different. I'm going to be chopping those all to bits and reformatting them into a sort of a different story. And I think I might do something a little different with that series. I'm not 100% sure exactly how it's going to play out, but I'm thinking I might just put together that series in such a way where I am self-critical of my own work. It'll be a little bit like watching myself work and saying, could have done that better, or that was a good idea. that sort of thing. So constructive criticism. So constructive criticism is something that I find very valuable. And whenever I'm showing my work to somebody who has skills that are on par or better than mine, who have some experience beyond me, I will very happily ask them for some constructive criticism of the work that I'm doing. Because of course, blowing smoke up my rear, telling me that what I've done looks beautiful is all well and good, but I like to know, what are the little things that I could have done better that maybe I didn't see. A lot of the time I can see my own flaws, but sometimes you can't. Sometimes somebody else is seeing something that you don't. And I think it's always valuable to find out what those things are. Okay, that's it for bloody batteries are almost blowing out on me. Okay, as I was saying, man, that's it for this week's video. If you would like to help support this channel, you can do it a number of ways. You can like and subscribe and that stuff. Of course, supporting me on Patreon, of course, financially is fantastic. And you can find links in the description or up in the corner. And of course, I've implemented the, I think, super fan page or something. There's a little heart with like a $sign on it here on your YouTube feed. You can click on that and send me a couple of bucks there if you like. And there's also a link to my PayPal account if you want to make a one-time donation. And I've got an affiliate account with Starbond. If you go to their website and make any purchases, I get a little piece of that pie. And if you use the coupon code Nomad10, you'll get 10% off on that purchase. Thank you very much if you follow through on that. It's been a slice. Catch you later. We'll see you on the next video. Adios. Ciao for now. Keep your stick on the ice.